Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Became Technoblade's Successor? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku had woken up to a new and fresh day, feeling as if something special was about to happen. He brushed off the feeling, thinking it was just a remnant of a nightmare. He focused on the future, having worked hard to overcome being diagnosed quirkless and inheriting the number one hero, All Might's quirk. All his efforts had paid off. He was now a second-year student at UA Academy, the most prestigious school in Japan, and he had a wonderful girlfriend, Ochako Uraraka. Life was good. Today his teacher, Shota Aizawa, also known as Eraserhead, announced that the class would be going somewhere for hero training. Eager to avoid being late and to see his girlfriend sooner, he decided to wake up early and complete his morning exercise routine. His morning consisted of waking up, exercising, showering, making breakfast, and heading to school. After about 30 minutes of jogging, he checked the time and realized he still had time before class. He returned to his room to freshen up and, after completing his morning routine, walked into the common room. There, he prepared pancakes, making plenty of batter in case other students woke up and wanted some, as his cooking was quite popular. A couple of minutes later, another student appeared, Momo Yaoyorozu, the wealthy girl from Class 2A. She looked a bit tired, so he decided to greet her cheerfully. She was startled, having expected to be the first one up since the class usually slept in for another hour. Turning to see Izuku, the class's sweet and endearing boy, preparing breakfast and waving at her, she felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Although she had developed a little crush on him, she had buried those feelings after Ochako's confession during the summer. She blushed and waved back, greeting him. He responded with enthusiasm, explaining that Aizawa had mentioned they were going somewhere for hero training, and he didn't want to be late. Momo remembered the announcement and complimented the delicious smell of the pancakes. He offered her some, and she eagerly nodded in agreement. He chuckled and patted her head, telling her to calm down while he prepared more. After they finished eating, the students made their way to class, only to find Aizawa locking the door. He instructed them to change into their hero costumes for rescue training at the USJ. As the class walked to the changing rooms, they carried their cases, and after getting changed, they headed to the entrance to find a bus waiting with Aizawa. He urged them to get in quickly before he left without them. They complied and boarded the bus, settling in as they began discussing various topics, including quirks, heroes, and, of course, All Might. Upon arriving, Izuku realized he needed to use the restroom, having consumed a lot of water during his jog, and the bus lacked facilities. He asked Aizawa for permission to go, and the teacher allowed him, advising him to be quick. After thanking Aizawa, he walked away from the class. As he closed the door, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. He turned to see what appeared to be a blow dart. As drowsiness began to wash over him, he glanced around and spotted a girl with messy buns in a high school uniform, holding a knife and syringe. It was Toga, and she gleefully expressed her desire to see his blood. She jabbed the syringe into his thigh, causing him to drop to one knee as she extracted some of his blood. Realization hit him, there was going to be an attack that day. Toga confirmed his fears, revealing that she and the other villains had been planning for months and that he would play a role in their scheme. As darkness enveloped him, he struggled to stay conscious, but eventually he succumbed. Meanwhile, back with the class, a portal opened at the bottom of the facility, catching Kirishima's attention. He exclaimed in surprise, thinking they had fake villains. Aizawa quickly corrected him, warning the students to stand back. The students were on edge, but what happened next shocked them even more. They heard a voice they recognized all too well. Izuku, now under Toga's influence, taunted the class, revealing that he was with the villains. Aizawa demanded he return, but Izuku, now Toga, declared that he was part of their plan. The heroes were in disbelief, struggling to comprehend that their sweet classmate had seemingly betrayed them. Bakugo confronted him, confused and hurt, while Momo insisted that this wasn't the real Izuku. But Toga, embodying Izuku, reveled in her new persona, claiming it was her new style and that she had plans to take down All Might. With a snap of her fingers, a Nomu emerged from the portal, intensifying the tension. As the portal opened beneath the students, separating them, Izuku regained consciousness in the restroom. Realizing where he was, he rushed out and kicked the door down just in time to witness All Might battling the Nomu, which had been thrown out of the USJ. He approached his classmates, who were still recovering from the chaos, and asked what had happened. The class turned to him, some instinctively taking defensive stances, while Mina warned him not to speak, calling him a traitor. Izuku, confused and alarmed, questioned what they meant by traitor. What did she mean? Izuku looked at Ochako, shocked and confused, tears beginning to well up in his eyes. He felt his heart shatter as he processed her words. She had stopped loving him, declaring that Lita was far better. At that moment, Izuku's world came to a standstill. His breath hitched as he pleaded silently for her to reconsider. Ochako confirmed his worst fears, stating that Lita was now her new boyfriend. Izuku's tears ceased momentarily as he turned his gaze toward Lita, searching for the truth. Lita scoffed, dismissing Izuku's worthiness, claiming that no one would want to be with someone who constantly put themselves in danger. Ochako moved closer to Lita, wrapping her arms around his neck while he held her waist, sharing a kiss that deepened the ache in Izuku's heart. Lita laughed at Izuku's broken expression, mocking him for ever believing he had her affection. The classmates, filled with anger towards Izuku for his perceived betrayal, looked at him with pity. He fell to his knees, silent tears streaming down his face, as if he had lost his voice. Lita called for help, and soon heroes arrived. All Might, Eraserhead, Nezu, Midnight, and Endeavor. As they approached, they found Izuku, a shell of his former self, weeping on the ground. Aizawa sensed something was amiss, while Nezu demanded an explanation from Izuku. With broken eyes, Izuku managed to croak out that it wasn't him who had caused the trouble. Endeavor challenged him, pointing out the numerous witnesses to his actions. All Might shook his head in disappointment, expressing regret over his choice in Izuku. The hulking hero approached him, and Izuku looked up, fear and desperation etched on his face. All Might declared that he would reclaim what was his, plucking a hair from Izuku's head and consuming it. Izuku felt the power of one for all drained from him, leaving only a faint ember of its former strength. Devastation washed over him. The power he had trained for and nearly sacrificed everything for was gone in an instant. If not for his mother, he might have considered ending it all. He reflected on a harsh truth: not everyone is created equal. Some bask in glory while others fade into obscurity. Life felt profoundly unfair. His usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by a cold, emotionless facade. He confronted the situation, asking if he was to be sent to Tartarus. The class was taken aback by this drastic change in his behavior. Nezu confirmed that he would await execution there. Even though Izuku anticipated this outcome, he still felt a deep sense of despair. He requested a moment to speak, wanting to express himself before their last meeting. Eraserhead intervened, insisting that he be allowed to say a few words. Izuku thanked his teacher and addressed the class, asking who believed in his innocence. A few hands went up, surprising everyone, especially when Bakugo's hand joined them. Grateful, Izuku began to share his thoughts. He expressed that the only thing that truly matters in this world is how one treats others. He acknowledged those who had shown him kindness, promising to repay it tenfold. But his expression darkened as he turned to those who had wronged him, vowing to repay their injustices 1,000 times over. Chills ran down the spines of his classmates. This was not the Izuku they knew. He locked eyes with Nezu, who maintained a calm exterior, though fear flickered in his gaze. Izuku declared he was ready for what came next, extending his hands for the quirk suppression cuffs. He chuckled, knowing he was no longer a threat without his power. As they walked toward the police car, Izuku initiated a conversation with All Might. He asked who would be the next to take on the mantle of One for All. All Might flinched at the disrespect in Izuku's tone, realizing the boy had lost all respect for him. All Might suggested Bakugo or Todoroki, but Izuku quickly dismissed them, pointing out their flaws and lack of teamwork. His analytical observations surprised All Might, who was taken aback by Izuku's insight. Izuku then presented his 3 candidates for the next successor, Mirio Togata, Hitoshi Shinso, and Ojiro Kirishima. He explained Mirio's exceptional control over his quirk and battle prowess, Shinso's resilient spirit despite his challenges, and Kirishima's warm heart beneath his tough exterior. Each choice reflected Izuku's understanding of heroism and the qualities that truly mattered. And if nurtured correctly, he could easily become the next #1 hero. He just needed support and trust. The words were laced with such intensity that All Might took a step back. The boy, once cheerful and kind, now spoke in a monotone voice, cold and distant. They had truly broken him. All Might felt compelled to speak, but Izuku interrupted him, expressing his frustration with a sharp dismissal. He pushed himself away from the man and settled into the back seat of the police car. The officer closed the door and took his place in the front, with Nezu sitting beside him. As they drove away, All Might remained in shock, grappling with the realization that young Midoriya had just cursed. Inside the police car, an awkward silence enveloped them. While Izuku appeared at ease, Nezu fidgeted nervously. The rodent turned to Izuku and posed a simple question about his actions. Izuku sighed, indicating that he had already addressed that topic. He challenged Nezu's intellect, suggesting that the greatest mind on the planet should be able to deduce the truth. Nezu, visibly frustrated, admitted that despite his intelligence, he could not comprehend Izuku's betrayal. He felt a conflict within himself, torn between the evidence and his instincts that told him otherwise. Izuku assured Nezu that he would eventually understand but warned him to maintain his trust. The police car came to a halt, and Izuku exited with a neutral expression. He approached the prison gates, where the guards were taken aback by his youth, especially in the company of the principal of UA. They exchanged polite greetings, and one guard inquired about Izuku's age. When Izuku revealed he was 15, the guard was astonished that someone so young was being brought to prison. The monotone quality of Izuku's voice hinted at deeper emotional scars. After a brief wait, the guard returned with a woman who appeared to be in her mid-40s. She had long black hair and piercing gray eyes, complemented by her striking figure. The warden assessed Izuku and then turned to Nezu, questioning whether this was indeed the boy he had mentioned. Nezu confirmed that all evidence pointed to Izuku being a criminal, despite the warden's reluctance to accept that a teenager like him should face such dire consequences. The warden, Hanito Usiaki, introduced herself and established the rules of the prison. She emphasized that as long as Izuku did not cause trouble, they would coexist peacefully. She then requested his name, age, quirk, and the reason for his presence there. Izuku calmly stated his name and age, revealing that he was quirkless and had been framed as the traitor of UA. Usiaki was taken aback by his quirklessness, realizing that this boy needed help, but it seemed too late for him. Usiaki instructed one of the guards, Beijo, to escort Izuku to his cell, where he would have a cellmate. Izuku followed the guard into a small room containing a bunk bed, a mirror, a desk, a sink, and a table with a pack of cards. Upon seeing his cellmate, he was surprised to recognize him. He greeted the figure, who was equally astonished to see him. Beijo, the guard, inquired if they knew each other, to which Izuku confirmed that he had once been involved in apprehending the hero killer. Both adults were taken aback. Beijo was shocked that a child had managed to capture such a notorious figure, while Stain was surprised by Izuku's demeanor. Beijo instructed Izuku to enter the cell, and he settled onto one of the bunks, staring at the ceiling. Stain, curious, asked what had happened to bring Izuku to this place. Izuku explained the events that led to his current situation, detailing how he had been framed. Stain reacted with disbelief, expressing his outrage at the betrayal Izuku had faced. Izuku acknowledged the situation's absurdity, and Stain pointed out that Izuku's attitude had changed drastically since they last met. Izuku explained that he had come to terms with the harsh realities of the world, unlike Stain, who had succumbed to madness. Stain, intrigued, asked how long Izuku would be his cellmate. Izuku replied that he had a month before his execution, which left Stain speechless. When he finally found his voice, he questioned how Izuku could accept such a fate so calmly. Izuku explained that with everything happening so quickly, he had simply accepted it. Stain sighed, asking what Izuku planned to do in his final days. Just then, Izuku noticed something unusual in the corner of the room, a leather book with a symbol of a pig's head. Stain dismissed it as just a wall, but Izuku insisted it was very real to him. He jumped off his bunk and approached the strange object, determined to uncover its significance. As Izuku picked up the book, he heard whispers around him, many murmuring words like exiled and traitor. When he opened the book, all the voices ceased. He glanced around the room and noticed Stain staring at him with a wild expression. Stain remarked that the book had just appeared and questioned whether Izuku's quirk was stockpiling. Izuku chuckled, hinting that Stain had no idea what was really happening. Just as Izuku was about to start reading, a different guard banged on the cell bars, announcing that it was lights out. Both Izuku and Stain acknowledged the command. Once everyone had settled down for the night, Izuku opened the book again and found the information he had been searching for. He wondered what a totem of undying was. As he turned the page, he accidentally sliced his finger on the paper, wincing at the pain. He clenched his fist, applying pressure to the cut, unaware that a drop of his blood had fallen onto the page, causing the green on the totem to glow. Suddenly, he felt lightheaded and heard a voice that seemed to come from nowhere, expressing curiosity about him. Izuku was startled and demanded to know who was speaking, but the voice simply told him he would find out soon enough. After the voice faded, he felt a headache coming on and wondered who it could have been. He flipped to the back of the book, only to close it quickly, his face turning red as he discovered a section on inappropriate topics. Shrugging it off, he tucked the book under his pillow, draped his sheet over himself, and fell asleep almost instantly. When Izuku woke up, he immediately checked under his pillow for the book, feeling relieved when he found it. He jumped off his bed and approached the cell door. The guard approached and struck the bars with his baton, the sound ringing painfully in Izuku's head. The guard opened the door, roughly pulling Izuku out and throwing him to the floor, kicking him in the stomach. Izuku winced, feeling the sting of pain. The guard coldly stated that he didn't care if Izuku was a kid, he would be treated like everyone else. Izuku groaned internally, realizing it was going to be a long month. The days dragged on, and the inmates grew increasingly aggressive. The beatings he endured were harsher than those from Katsuki in their childhood, and after bandaging his wounds, he noticed the guards had their own injuries, suggesting they were just as brutal with each other. He was treated like an animal, receiving only 2 meals a day, enduring severe beatings, reading the book, and sleeping. That was his routine. Speaking of the book, he had learned the language it was written in, a mix of Latin and Spanish, and was fascinated to discover it was titled, The Art of Technoblade. It contained all of the author's life findings and inventions. The one that intrigued him most was the Totem of Undying, a small humanoid figurine made mostly of squares that could prevent a person from dying. The instructions for creating one included glass and clay, but the most essential component was a human soul. Izuku, being a teenager, couldn't bring himself to take a life for something he wasn't even sure would work. Stain had offered to be the sacrifice, but Izuku couldn't harm him. Stain was the only one who treated him with kindness in this hellish place, while others had threatened his life multiple times. He learned to ignore their taunts and carry on with his day. One day, while doing his daily exercise routine, which included push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, bench pressing, and shadowboxing, a guard visited his cell. The guard announced that he had a letter for Izuku. He handed it over, and as Izuku tore it open, his expression shifted from curiosity to shock, then to unbridled rage. Stain noticed the change and asked what was wrong. With tears in his eyes, Izuku handed the letter to Stain, who read it and felt a surge of anger. The letter revealed a dark family secret, stating that Izuku's father had been targeted by a trained assassin, and now, on the day of Izuku's execution, his mother would be waiting for him. The letter concluded with a chilling message from Endeavor, leaving Izuku feeling a profound sense of betrayal and fury. The emotional weight of the letter snapped something inside him, and his eyes reflected a newfound intensity, devoid of the hope he once held. The overwhelming bloodlust emanating from both Izuku and Stain alerted the warden, who approached the cell, concerned about the escalating tension. She had initially underestimated Izuku, but now he appeared transformed, radiating an aura of danger. Stain calmly handed the letter to the warden, who read it and felt sympathy for the boy, realizing the immense burden he carried at such a young age. The warden attempted to calm Izuku, but he interrupted her, expressing his desire for the execution to happen immediately. He felt that with his mother gone, he had nothing left to lose. He suggested that the inmates could decide his fate, showing his willingness to confront whatever came next. "Just please let me go." He looked at the warden with such a broken expression that she felt her heart squeeze. Usuyaki acknowledged his plea, saying they would proceed in an hour. Izuku quietly expressed his gratitude. As the warden left, Stain held the boy's shoulders, urging him to reconsider, stating he could still find a way out. Izuku, however, felt resigned and assured Stain that he was fine with the decision. Stain sighed, hoping Izuku would get to see his loved one again. He smiled warmly, which Izuku weakly mirrored. Time passed, and after about an hour, Izuku was gently pulled from his bunk. The other inmates, having heard his story, looked at him with pity or sympathy. Even some of the tougher ones regarded him with a sad expression. He paid little attention as he walked out to the yard. He inquired about how the execution would proceed. Usuyaki informed him that after a vote, it had been decided he would face a crushing execution, with an anvil dropped on him, hopefully ending his life instantly. Izuku thanked her, eager to get it over with. She nodded and gestured for him to step into a cage. He complied, waiting for his fate. As he heard Usuyaki instruct the executioner to begin, he heard chains rattling. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath. Moments later, he felt a sharp pain, followed by a blank white space. As he looked around, a figure approached him. The figure expressed regret, stating that Izuku was now an orphan. As it drew closer, Izuku could faintly see pink hair and a crown atop the figure's head. He asked who the figure was and where he was, wondering if he was dead. The figure introduced itself, confirming that Izuku was indeed dead. Izuku recognized the figure as Technoblade. As Technoblade came into full view, Izuku noted his height, short pink hair, long pointed ears, and the small golden crown. He wore a white shirt, trousers, and a red robe, complemented by a pig skull with tusks. Technoblade informed Izuku that he had to return to the living world, as he had unfinished business. Izuku protested, feeling he had nothing left to live for after losing his mother and being betrayed by friends and mentors. He believed it was better this way. Technoblade firmly told him not to speak that way about himself, reminding him that many cared for him. If he didn't want to live for himself, he should do it for them. He wouldn't want his successor to be a coward. Izuku looked at Technoblade and saw a warm smile reminiscent of his mother's, which sparked a realization within him. He agreed to return. Technoblade noted that since Izuku had prepared a totem, the process would be easier than expected. He explained he would transfer Izuku's soul into it. Izuku, confused, asked if he would become a doll. Technoblade reassured him that he would not, but he would resemble him more. He added one final request. Izuku should carry on his name. Izuku smiled and nodded. Suddenly, he felt a strong tugging force in his gut, flinging him from the white space back into reality. He saw a flash of green, and then his vision quickly returned. To the onlookers, it appeared as if the boy had been crushed, but then the anvil began to move. A green light flashed, and the headless figure stood up after pushing the anvil off. Gradually, the head regrew, layer by layer. As the dust settled, a figure with green hair and covered in sweat emerged. Laughter erupted from him, and he proclaimed that Technoblade never dies. At Yue, Nezu had just returned from Tartarus and was at his desk when 4 individuals barged into his office: Aizawa, Momo, Katsuki, and Kirishima. He looked up calmly, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Nezu expressed his hope that they had a good reason for their intrusion. They bowed, apologizing, and one of them quickly began to speak. Aizawa proposed a wager, stating that if they found evidence proving Izuku's innocence, they would get him out of prison. Nezu, intrigued, asked what would happen if they failed. Aizawa replied that Nezu would decide the punishment. Nezu's grin turned sadistic as he accepted the wager, revealing he had spoken to Izuku before his imprisonment. He noted that Izuku neither trusted nor hated him, and while he wouldn't help them, he wouldn't hinder their efforts either. After a moment of contemplation, the four nodded in agreement. Nezu, surrounded by a dark aura as he sipped his tea, ordered them to leave his office. They scrambled out, knowing the rules about Nezu: never barge in without permission and never make deals with the devil. With 1 month to either free Izuku or face the consequences, 2 weeks passed without any leads. They searched every camera, library, and website, but nothing surfaced. Most of the class had given up, but Aizawa was still at his desk when a knock at the door interrupted him. Curious, he opened it to find the villainous Toga standing there. He immediately got into a fighting stance, but upon closer inspection, he noticed that she was crying. Aizawa felt a mix of surprise and confusion as he addressed Toga, questioning her presence. Toga explained that she was there to turn herself in, her voice trembling with emotion. Aizawa was flabbergasted. One of Japan's most feared villains, crying and surrendering. He asked her why she would do such a thing, expressing his skepticism about her intentions. Toga revealed that she only wanted Izuku to be arrested, not harmed. She wanted him to be safe from future disasters and not to pursue a path as a hero. Aizawa remained doubtful and questioned how he could trust her. Toga insisted she had evidence to prove Izuku's innocence, a video she had recorded. Her revelation sparked Aizawa's interest, and he urged her to show him the video, as they had been trying to prove his innocence for weeks. Toga played the video, which depicted the scene between her and Izuku, including his transformation and the knockout. Aizawa's eyes widened as he realized the significance of the footage. He declared it could save Izuku and insisted they needed to see Nezu immediately. Toga cheered in excitement, but Aizawa cautioned her that, as a precaution, he would need to put her in court-canceling cuffs. Toga nodded and held out her hands. When they arrived at the principal's office, Toga was about to kick the door, but Aizawa stopped her, warning that they should knock if they wanted to live. He knocked, and after a moment, they heard a small voice inviting them in. Inside, Nezu was seated at his desk, sipping tea. He looked up, surprised to see Aizawa and a handcuffed Toga. Aizawa explained the situation and handed Nezu a small USB drive containing the video. Nezu played the video, his eyes widening in shock at the contents. He quickly realized the urgency of the situation and declared they needed to get Izuku out immediately. Aizawa confirmed he was on it. Time passed as they rushed toward the UA gates. Suddenly, a helicopter landed in front of them, and Nezu, looking urgent, called them inside. He revealed that he had received a call informing him that Izuku's mother had been killed, prompting the decision to move forward with his execution. Katsuki asked how much time they had, and Nezu grimly replied that they had only an hour. Momo expressed her disbelief at the urgency, and Aizawa explained Izuku's perspective. He had been knocked out by a villain, awoken to chaos, and faced betrayal and loss. With his mother gone, he was desperate for an end to his suffering. The group was taken aback by this realization. As they flew toward Tartarus, an awkward silence filled the helicopter. Upon arrival, they rushed to the prison yard, pushing through the crowd. Their hearts sank as they witnessed the execution about to take place. They were too late to save him, and tears streamed down their faces as they realized the gravity of the situation. In their despair, they failed to notice the body twitching and the anvil moving. 2 male inmates, distracted by Momo, approached her with ill intentions. One of them attempted to grab her, but their actions were interrupted by a sudden shout from Izuku, who had miraculously returned. He appeared half-naked and disheveled, shouting defiantly into the sky. The inmates lost interest in Momo and turned their attention back to Izuku. Seeing Momo in distress, Izuku's expression shifted to fury. He rushed toward the inmates, moving with incredible speed. He struck one of them in the gut, knocking him to the ground. Izuku's hair began to change color as he confronted the second inmate, delivering a swift knee to the face that sent blood flying. Fueled by anger, Izuku grabbed the inmate by the hair and unleashed a flurry of punches. He transformed further, gaining a white shirt and a red robe. With a fierce glare, he lifted the man off the ground, his eyes glowing red. He summoned a shimmering purple sword, declaring that the inmate was about to face punishment. With a swift motion, he hurled the man into the prison wall while simultaneously throwing his sword, severing the inmate's arm. The man screamed in pain, clutching his injury in shock. Satisfied with his actions, Izuku turned to Momo, unaware of the blood on his face. He commented on the situation, noting the absurdity of getting prisoner blood on himself. He then greeted his friends, who were still in shock at his return. The entire prison had turned to look at him, and he was momentarily confused by their stares. Nezu was the first to recover, exclaiming in disbelief at Izuku's miraculous return and transformation. Izuku casually mentioned that he might now be immortal, leaving everyone speechless. Izuku stood amidst the chaos, his heart racing as he tried to explain himself. He recalled the flash of energy that had surged through him, marking the awakening of his quirk. As he spoke, a prison guard pushed through the crowd, his eyes widening at the scene before him. The guard called out, demanding to know what had happened. His gaze fell on Izuku, and he noted the change in his appearance, complimenting him on his new look. Izuku insisted that he had acted in self-defense, trying to convince the guard of his innocence. The guard, however, seemed skeptical, questioning the age of the child involved. Izuku then turned his attention to his hair, and Momo created a mirror for him. The yard fell silent as they awaited his reaction. When he saw his reflection, Izuku exclaimed in surprise, causing everyone to flinch. He began striking poses, reveling in his newfound confidence, much to the amusement and bewilderment of those around him. Nezu approached Izuku, expressing his concern and curiosity about how he had survived. Izuku, momentarily distracted, acknowledged his existence and suggested they find a more private space to talk. In a private meeting room, Izuku, Nezu, Aizawa, Katsuki, Kirishima, and Momo gathered around a round table. Izuku casually asked what they wanted to know. Katsuki, unable to contain his frustration, demanded to know how Izuku had pulled off his impressive feats. Izuku playfully asked which feat Katsuki was referring to, prompting Nezu to clarify that they were particularly interested in the resurrection. He also inquired how Izuku had known the child was an orphan. Izuku explained that he had a unique sense for such things, likening it to a heightened awareness. Nezu pressed for details about what had happened to Izuku and his hair. Izuku hesitated, prompting Katsuki to urge him to speak up. Kirishima tried to calm Katsuki, insisting that pestering wasn't the way to go. Katsuki, however, threatened to unleash his powers if Izuku remained silent. At that moment, a new figure appeared beside Izuku, resembling him but taller and with longer hair, wielding a glowing purple sword. The figure introduced himself as Technoblade and stated that he would speak on Izuku's behalf. Katsuki was taken aback by the name, demanding to know what Technoblade had just called him. Technoblade responded with a calm demeanor, suggesting that he would defend himself if necessary. Momo noted that this echoed what Izuku had said earlier, leading Technoblade to remark that Izuku must have made his first kill, which he found impressive. Nezu, confused, asked for clarification about the first kill and Technoblade's identity. Technoblade explained that he had chosen Izuku as his successor and that the first kill was part of the process to gain his powers. Nezu raised concerns about whether Izuku would need to continue such actions, to which Technoblade reassured him that Izuku was a good kid and would not be corrupted. Kirishima, moved by the situation, shed manly tears, while Aizawa inquired about the powers Izuku would gain. Technoblade outlined the abilities Izuku would acquire, including the ability to summon weapons and armor, create potions, craft items, analyze opponents, and transform into different forms that enhanced his combat capabilities. Aizawa was taken aback by the extent of the powers, while Nezu inquired about potential drawbacks. Technoblade acknowledged that Izuku might become more prideful and short-tempered, and he would occasionally hear voices in his head, which he referred to as chat. Nezu then shifted the conversation to Izuku's situation, revealing that they had found evidence of his innocence and wanted him to return to UA. Izuku was surprised and asked how they had discovered this. Aizawa explained that Toga had confessed, revealing her concern for Izuku's well-being. Izuku quietly expressed his disbelief at Toga's actions. He then turned to Technoblade, asking if he would be able to control his new powers immediately. Technoblade chuckled, explaining that it would take several months for Izuku to master them. Nezu noted that there were 7 months until the next class year, suggesting that Izuku could join Class 2A if he returned. Izuku agreed but laid out 3 conditions. He wanted to stay at Tartarus until he mastered his powers, he wanted Stain's time there to be reduced, and he wished to fight Endeavor upon his release. A dark aura surrounded Izuku and Technoblade as Nezu considered his requests. He found them reasonable but questioned why Izuku wanted to fight Endeavor instead of All Might. Izuku handed Nezu an envelope containing a letter from Endeavor, instructing him to open it on the day of his release. Nezu acknowledged the plan and decided it was time to leave. As they exited the prison, Momo turned to Izuku, her cheeks flushed. She asked him to bend down slightly, and when he complied, she unexpectedly kissed his cheek before running back to the group, flustered. Izuku, taken aback, remarked to himself that it was a nice gesture. Technoblade teased him about having a girlfriend, causing Izuku to jump in surprise and blush, embarrassed by the comment. As they left, Izuku realized that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined, filled with new challenges and opportunities ahead. It had been half an hour since Izuku's classmates had left, and now he and Technoblade were discussing their favorite weapons. Izuku noted that the axe had a longer reach and good momentum, while the bow was versatile, effective for both long-range shooting and close combat. Technoblade acknowledged that the axe delivered better critical damage and had superior durability. Izuku then reminded him of the fishing rod, which Technoblade playfully referred to as the Almighty Rod. Izuku was curious about the training he would undergo. Technoblade assured him that it would transform him completely, warning that it would be a grueling experience. Izuku felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach at the thought. As they continued, Technoblade asked if Izuku would forgive his former classmates. Izuku was uncertain, stating that it would depend on their reactions when he returned. The first month of training was intense. Technoblade had devised a rigorous regimen for Izuku, which included 500 push-ups, 500 sit-ups, 500 squats, and a 50-kilometer run, all while carrying 200 kilograms of weights. Initially, it felt unbearable, but after a week, Izuku began to adapt. Technoblade was a relentless instructor, reminiscent of Gran Torino's tough teaching methods from Izuku's first year. By the second month, Izuku had consistently followed the training plan, resulting in a remarkable increase in his strength, endurance, and speed up by 400%. Technoblade was pleased with his progress and began addressing him by name rather than calling him kid or casual. Izuku also learned the basics of swordplay and added tree felling to his regimen to enhance his swing and build muscle. In the third month, Izuku had mastered various sword techniques and developed a lean, muscular physique. He had grown from 5 feet 6 inches to 6 feet 2 inches, and his hair had lengthened to his waist. When he inquired about the hair growth, Technoblade casually suggested that he simply tie it back to keep it out of his way. As the fourth month rolled around, others began to notice the changes in Izuku. He saw negative messages scrawled on the walls of his cell, words like weak, freak, and die worthless mutt. Although he had heard such taunts before, they still affected him, leading him to adopt a more emotionless demeanor and a calm, monotone voice, reminiscent of Technoblade. His training progressed to sword fighting with Technoblade himself, resulting in a new collection of scars that matched those on his hands and arms. One notable scar crossed his nose, a reminder of when his sword broke during practice and caused a minor injury. Although it healed quickly, he felt the sting for hours afterward. Izuku also developed his own martial art, which he named Pig Step. This style focused on covering his blind spots and was unpredictable to opponents. To further challenge himself, he trained with 500-kilogram weights. By the 5th month, Izuku had endured bullying for some time and learned to ignore it. However, one day the situation escalated. While he and Technoblade were resting, a convict managed to break free from his quirk-canceling cuffs and gained control over his quirk, called Fusion. This ability allowed the user to permanently attach objects to anything. The convicts had saved 2 small hog tusks from their meals and opened Izuku's cell while he slept. They restrained him and injected him with a drag that slowed his regeneration before inflicting a painful cut at the corners of his mouth, making it wider. Izuku awoke in agony, filled with rage as the quirk user inserted the tusks into his mouth and sealed them there permanently. They then stitched him up and administered an antidote while grinning smugly. That night, the halls of Tartarus echoed with the sounds of chaos, including Izuku's anguished screams and the maniacal laughter of the convicts. In the 6th month, Izuku had adjusted to his new appearance and learned to keep his guard up, resulting in minimal sleep, usually only 30 minutes to an hour at a time. He perfected all the martial arts and powers he had gained, including various potion recipes. His progress had exceeded Technoblade's expectations, and over the past 6 months, they had developed a father-son bond, with Technoblade's influence evident in Izuku's sarcasm and darker worldview. All that remained was to read the entire art of Technoblade. At that moment, Technoblade was reading to Izuku about the Potato War II. He recounted his experiences of grinding potatoes and how he had rubbed his success in his competition's face, humorously lamenting how it cost him a year of his life. Izuku listened with wide eyes, captivated by the story and eager to try farming himself. Suddenly, the warden burst into their cell, breathless and alarmed, announcing that the USJ was under attack. Izuku groaned at the news, feeling exasperated that the attackers needed to come up with new strategies. He turned to Technoblade, contemplating their options for escape. Technoblade suggested that a dramatic exit through the nether would be far more exciting than a sudden teleportation. They exchanged grins, and Izuku took the initiative, summoning black chalk to draw a large rectangular shape on the wall. He then grabbed a match from his bed and lit it. Izuku expressed his anticipation, feeling a thrill at what was about to happen. He threw the match at the drawing, which then transformed into a physical, blocky portal that glowed purple for a moment. The warden questioned whether something was supposed to happen, while Techno advised to give it a minute. After a few seconds, the edges of the portal began to emit a purple and pink gas, contained within the portal's frame. Once the gas filled the area, a small shockwave was followed by a low humming noise. Izuku and Techno exchanged nods. Techno evaporated into a pink mist and flew into Izuku's head as he jumped through the portal, entering the nether. He took a deep breath, releasing it with a smile, enjoying the scent of the surroundings. The boy ran for a minute, covering what felt like several miles, and repeated the process with the portal. Just before jumping in, his crown glowed a bright white, and he smiled, hoping to make a cool entrance. At the USJ, villains had attacked and were gaining the upper hand. The class found themselves surrounded and frightened. Mina voiced their concerns, asking what they should do, while Mineta panicked, exclaiming he didn't want to die without having experienced more of life. Katsuki urged everyone to stay calm, declaring he had a plan. He looked at Momo, who nodded in agreement, trusting him. In a flashback, back at the prison meeting room, Izuku had called Katsuki and Momo over. He instructed them that if they were ever in trouble, they should crush a stone that would alert him, promising to come as soon as possible. They acknowledged his words. In the present, Shigaraki was monologuing about his plan, mocking the heroes for their inability to handle the villains. He laughed maniacally, his expression twisted with madness. At that moment, Katsuki stepped forward, asserting that they didn't need to cry because they had everything under control. Shigaraki challenged them, pointing out the 5 imposing figures of Super Nomus before them. He then gestured to their barely conscious teacher, Aizawa, and slowly approached the group, taunting them about what they could possibly have that he did not. Katsuki smiled confidently, stepping closer to Shigaraki and asserting that he possessed something Shigaraki would never have. Shigaraki, mocking him, asked what that was. Katsuki chuckled, releasing small explosions and pulling out a crystal from his hero outfit pocket. He declared he had the blade, crushing the crystal and enveloping the area in purple smoke. Shigaraki questioned Kurogiri about the situation, but Kurogiri denied involvement. A deep voice echoed throughout the facility, expressing annoyance at being disturbed from sleep. The gas coalesced into a large purple ball before exploding, revealing a man with long pink hair, dressed in a shirt, waistcoat, and robe, wearing a pig skull mask. Izuku demanded to know which of the villains dared to mess with his friends, drawing his netherite sword and pointing it at one of them. The villain shook his head frantically, and Izuku pointed at another, causing that villain to faint in fear. He then lowered his sword and glared at Shigaraki, asking if it was him. Shigaraki faltered, insisting they had no business together and urging Izuku to leave before he got hurt. This made Izuku laugh, a fit of maniacal laughter that left him clutching his sides on the ground. Once he regained his composure, he stood up, facing the furious Shigaraki. He found Shigaraki's words amusing, remarking that it was tough to kill a god. In an instant, Izuku vanished from sight, reappearing in front of one of the Super Nomus, a towering creature with exaggerated features. He seized the monster's jaw, tearing it off with a swift motion. Before the creature could react, Izuku summoned his trusty weapon and dispatched it quickly. He then pulled it out, looking at Shigaraki with a nonchalant expression, questioning the effectiveness of the Super Nomus. He charged at another Super Nomu, grabbing its antenna and swinging it around before slamming it down, breaking its legs. He hummed a tune while he engaged the creature, methodically attacking it. After dispatching that Nomu, he kicked the remains towards the stunned Shigaraki, strolling toward him with a confident demeanor. He counted the small villains surrounding the class, noting the odds with a smirk. "There are 98 of you left." A crazed smile spread across his face as he sped off toward the location of the most villains. The remaining class members, minus Katsuki and Momo, stood trembling. They had just witnessed an unknown individual take down enemies before their eyes. Mina questioned who the mysterious figure was, while Tsuyu's instincts urged her to flee. Mineta's fear was evident as he made nervous sounds. Tokoyami sensed a dark aura radiating from the figure. Most of the class instinctively backed away, except for Katsuki, Momo, and Kirishima. Kirishima felt a strange connection to the pink-haired boy and moved closer to the other two to inquire about him. Katsuki instructed Kirishima to watch the unfolding scene. Denki turned to Jairu, asking if she could hear what the figure was saying. The class turned their attention to her as she plugged her earphone jack into the ground. Jairu confirmed she could hear, though it made little sense to her. Siro urged her to explain, and she quickly connected her other earphone jack to her speaker, inviting the class to gather around and listen. The figure's voice boomed with enthusiasm, proclaiming his dominance and calling for chaos. The class watched in horror as chaos erupted on the battlefield, with limbs scattered and cries echoing in the air. By the time he finished his unsettling declarations, the villains lay defeated, most of them lifeless. Amidst the destruction, the figure stood tall, panting and holding a sword and axe. As the dust settled, he noticed Shigaraki furiously scratching at his neck, drawing blood. Shigaraki's anger boiled over as he declared that he would send an antivirus to eliminate the hero. He commanded Kurogiri to bring forth Project Number 9 to confront him. Kurogiri hesitated, noting that Project Number 9 was still in testing, but Shigaraki insisted, disregarding the warning. A massive portal of purple mist opened, and from it emerged a towering creature, black-skinned and scarred, with no eyes and an exposed brain. Shigaraki laughed maniacally, taunting the hero and belittling the heroes as mere pawns of the government. This struck a nerve in the figure, who had been trained under Technoblade. He had not only gained power but also ideals that set him apart from Shigaraki's twisted philosophy. He firmly rejected Shigaraki's invitation to join their cause, laughing at the absurdity of the suggestion. Shigaraki was taken aback by this unexpected response. He had anticipated the figure would align with their views, but instead, he felt humiliated. Anger surged within him as he demanded to know who the figure was. The hero approached Shigaraki, causing him to feel uneasy. The figure revealed that Shigaraki had overlooked a crucial detail in his planning. He closed the distance between them, each step intensifying the tension. With a chilling declaration, he introduced himself as Technoblade. In a flash, he dashed toward Project Number 9, severing one of its legs. To his surprise, the limb regenerated almost instantly, igniting a spark of excitement within him. He welcomed the challenge, eager for a legendary battle. The creature charged at him, mouth agape, but he deftly leaped over it, slicing off one of its spikes. The Nomu roared in response, and he realized the fight would be tougher than anticipated. Utilizing a strength potion, he struck the creature's tail, shattering its back leg. The Nomu howled in pain, only to retaliate by launching him into the mountainside, leaving him injured and pinned. The heroes felt a wave of dread wash over them as their last hopes seemed to falter. They turned to Shigaraki, who wore a victorious grin. He mocked the fallen hero, taunting him about his earlier bravado. Most of the class began to retreat from Shigaraki's menacing presence, but Katsuki and Momo remained composed. Hagakure questioned their calmness, fearing for their lives. Momo reassured them, believing in the hero's ability to win, while Katsuki urged them to give him a moment. Kirishima sought clarification, but before he could finish, explosions erupted in the distance. They turned to see vibrant fireworks lighting up the sky, signaling that the battle was far from over. There was silence until a voice echoed through the air, filled with mockery. Izuku stepped out from behind the mountain, unscathed and with a new arm. He began to transform. The pig skull took on a pink hue, his eyes turned completely white, and his long, messy pink hair straightened and braided itself. Black gloves adorned his hands, and a crown emerged from the small badge on his chest, settling atop his head. Once transformed into his half-serious form, he stretched and summoned a netherite pickaxe. He charged towards the Nomu, striking it repeatedly legs, torso, everywhere. The creature grew weary, its stamina depleting as it struggled to regenerate, while Izuku showed no signs of slowing down. This realization sent Shigaraki into a fit of rage. Shigaraki shouted in frustration, expressing his anger over the damage Izuku had inflicted on their plans. Izuku responded with a powerful kick that sent the monster staggering back. He crouched low, preparing for his final strike, declaring his intent with enthusiasm. The creature roared, revealing its sharp yellow fangs, and Izuku proclaimed that he would drive his pickaxe through its teeth. With a swift motion, he hurled the pickaxe into the Nomu's mouth, shattering teeth and piercing its skull. The creature ceased its movements, collapsing as Izuku retrieved his tool from its head. He sighed and turned his gaze towards Shigaraki. Izuku inquired if Shigaraki wanted to know his name, to which Shigaraki cautiously nodded. Izuku pointed to his head, prompting Momo to create a cardboard box. She covered her stomach, crafted the desired object, and tossed it down to him. Izuku caught the box and smiled, anticipating the chaos it would bring. As he opened the box, everyone gasped at the sight of a green wig. Katsuki recognized Izuku's intentions and laughed. Izuku detransformed, removed his mask, and donned the wig. When he looked up, everyone was taken aback by his presence. With a crazed smile, he adjusted his glove and asked if Shigaraki had missed him. Shigaraki stammered in disbelief, insisting that Izuku should not possess such power, claiming All Might had taken it back. Izuku's smile faded, replaced by a fierce snarl as he declared that he and All Might were not related, calling him a peasant and vowing to make everyone aware of it. Summoning his orphan obliterator, Izuku charged at Shigaraki, who shouted for Kurogiri to get them out of there. A purple mist enveloped Shigaraki, and both he and Kurogiri vanished. Izuku sighed and lowered his sword, smiling and waving at his astonished classmates. Most of the class stood in shock, realizing that the one they had deemed a traitor had just returned and defeated a foe they could not handle together. Lita, determined to confront Izuku, demanded to know what he was doing there and vowed to stop him. As Lita assumed a fighting stance, Katsuki, Momo, and Kirishima tried to intervene, but Izuku's next words halted them. He casually remarked that it was fine, as Lita couldn't do anything anyway. Folding his arms, he awaited Lita's move, which only fueled Lita's anger. Lita shouted in defiance and activated his Recipro Burst, propelling himself towards Izuku. In response, Izuku summoned a fishing rod, wrapping it around Lita's leg and pulling him off course, causing him to fall face-first to the ground. The onlookers chuckled at Lita's mishap as Izuku mockingly reeled him in. Izuku taunted Lita, calling him a dipstick and claiming he must be the last one of the season. Lita's face flushed with embarrassment as he struggled to free himself from the binding. After a moment, Izuku grew bored and lightly tapped him on the back of the neck, rendering him unconscious. With Lita down, Izuku asked for an F in the chat, leaving the class confused. Uchako, curious, asked how he was there, referring to him as a traitor. Izuku, incredulous, expressed disbelief that she hadn't noticed his arrival, lamenting that the moment had been ruined. As he pouted, the heroes arrived, including All Might, Nezu, Power Loader, Midnight, Present Mic, and Ectoplasm. Upon spotting Izuku, All Might leaped forward, ready to confront him. He declared it was time to bring Izuku down, pulling back his hand for a powerful strike. As All Might shouted his signature move, a massive dust cloud erupted upon impact, forcing everyone to shield their eyes from the debris. When the dust settled, the heroes found themselves facing a massive crater with two figures at its center, All Might and the humanoid pig creature that was Izuku in his assault mode, visibly furious. His arm had shattered from the blow but began to regenerate rapidly due to his transformation. Izuku questioned the gratitude he received for saving them, retransformed into his semi-serious form, and glared at All Might, hatred evident in his eyes. He criticized All Might's heroism, calling him a peasant and challenging him about his power. All Might, taken aback, demanded to know how Izuku knew of a name he had no right to speak. Izuku let out a dark chuckle, mocking the idea that he had no right, revealing the years of training and sacrifice he had made, only to have it all vanish in an instant. His laughter echoed, filling the air with tension as he reveled in the chaos of the moment. He walked towards All Might and picked up the fallen green wig. All Might shouted for him to stand back, treating him as a villain. Izuku removed his mask, changing his eyes from their usual red to their former green. All Might warned him again, getting into a fighting stance as Izuku donned the wig, the only remnant of his past look being the scars resembling pig tusks. Izuku asked if that made All Might proud, to which All Might expressed disbelief, questioning what he meant. Izuku looked up, revealing blood trickling from his mouth, and repeated his question with emphasis. All Might, shocked, exclaimed that Izuku should be imprisoned. Izuku replied that he had been until he noticed Nezu, who smiled back cheerfully. Izuku inquired if Nezu had kept something from them, and Nezu admitted he thought it would be fun, and indeed it was. Oako, confused, asked what Nezu had not disclosed. The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Nezu, who calmly surveyed the group before pointing at Izuku. Nezu asked what they thought of midoriya, prompting an eruption of accusations such as traitor, animal, and murderer, alongside a few voices claiming not guilty and innocent, with one even calling him handsome. Nezu then posed a question about Izuku's innocence. At that moment, Lita, who had just woken up, questioned how Izuku could possibly be innocent. Nezu's eyebrow twitched as he raised a remote and pressed a button, transforming the glass dome of the USJ into a massive screen showcasing the footage of Toga's and Izuku's confrontation. After witnessing the evidence of Izuku's innocence, the class fell silent, realizing the boy they had deemed a traitor was actually innocent. They looked at Izuku, who sat with a smug grin, his red eyes gleaming with delight. He declared that he took back what he had said to Nezu, finding the situation amusing. Nezu raised an eyebrow, pondering the idea of a shared sadistic enjoyment, before confirming that Izuku was indeed innocent and would return to UA as a student. This announcement was met with an eerie silence, broken only by the rustling of the green wig and footsteps approaching the exit. Izuku, appearing bored, asked if they were going to leave or not. Time passed, and he found himself back in the place filled with memories, both good and bad. As he walked down the halls, he encountered 4 individuals: Mirio, Tamaki, Nijire, and Eri. They rounded the corner to see a man with pink hair in royal attire, smiling at the notice board while leaning on a sword plunged into the ground. The unfamiliar sight put them on edge. Mirio asked who he was, and Izuku turned to see Eri looking despondent, which pained him. A lump formed in his throat as he called her name. Slowly, Eri looked up, tears welling in her eyes as she recognized him and called out for her father. Izuku covered his mouth, tears threatening to spill as he felt an unfamiliar emotion: happiness. Despite his transformation into a cold, nonchalant figure, Eri still remembered him as her father. He nodded, and Eri smiled brightly, jumping into his arms and knocking his crown off. They both cried, embracing tightly as if afraid to let go. The class arrived, witnessing the heartfelt reunion and feeling ashamed for betraying their classmate and separating a father from his daughter. Eri expressed her sadness at his absence, and Izuku apologized, promising he would never leave again. As they separated, Eri noticed Izuku's changed appearance, and he realized she had changed too. They both questioned each other's new looks and shared a laugh. Aizawa explained that Eri had chosen pink hair to symbolize her desire for change after the incident with Overhaul. Izuku nodded, then called Eri's attention to his fallen crown. She joyfully picked it up and placed it on his head while Aizawa captured the moment with a photo. They embraced once more, and Izuku vowed never to leave again. After the emotional reunion, Izuku made his way to Nezu's office to discuss the upcoming fight. Before he could knock, he heard a shaky invitation to enter. Inside, he found Nezu trembling while holding the letter from Endeavor. Izuku addressed Nezu, asking if he could proceed with the fight. Nezu, with a sinister smile, agreed but proposed a partnership, suggesting they work together for revenge against their respective enemies. Izuku smiled in response, feeling a sense of agreement forming between them. Nezu, unfazed by Izuku's antics, had anticipated his behavior and was prepared for their collaboration. Izuku realized he would have to stay with his brother a bit longer. They exchanged smiles and shared a maniacal laugh. After a few minutes, they calmed down and began to strategize for the upcoming fight against Endeavor. Izuku wondered if it was possible to have the fight that day. Nezu informed him that he needed to take a phone call first. Izuku nodded as Nezu searched for Endeavor's agency number and dialed. After a couple of rings, Endeavor answered. Nezu felt a twitch of irritation at Endeavor's attempt to sound friendly. He explained that someone wanted to challenge him to a fight and mentioned a family secret that had not yet been revealed. Endeavor quickly accepted the challenge but insisted it be a life-and-death battle, refusing to participate otherwise. Nezu glanced at Izuku, who was yawning while tinkering with a small red and white rocket-shaped object. Nezu assured Endeavor that Izuku was fine with the terms and asked what time he would arrive. Endeavor stated he would be there in an hour, warning Nezu not to let Izuku leave. Nezu's demeanor shifted, a dark aura surrounding him as he reminded Endeavor of his manners. Endeavor quickly acknowledged his mistake, and after ending the call, Nezu grinned at Izuku, who was now wearing crafting glasses and reading The Art of War. Time passed, and at 3 p.m., Izuku waited in the center of a ring set up for the sports festival's 1v1 battles. Surrounding the arena were classes 2A and 2B, along with Aizawa, Vlad King, Nezu, and All Might. Moments later, a black car arrived, and Endeavor stepped out in his hero costume. He approached the ring, sizing up Izuku with a frown, questioning Nezu about his identity. Nezu promised to explain later and urged them to start the fight. Endeavor nodded as Nezu took on the role of referee. Nezu announced that this was a life-and-death battle between the number 2 hero and Technoblade, stating the match could only end in death or serious injury. With no questions from the combatants, the battle began. Endeavor launched a blast of blue fire at Izuku, engulfing him as the spectators gasped. Momo cried out in concern, while Lita mocked the situation, and Katsuki shouted Izuku's name. Even Nezu showed a hint of worry. Endeavor scoffed, believing Izuku to be pathetic for thinking he could fight him. As he turned to leave, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Izuku standing there, thin orange and yellow steam rising off him. Izuku remarked that the attack could have killed an ordinary person. Endeavor, enraged, demanded to know what Izuku had called him. Izuku repeated the insult and taunted him about his past actions. Endeavor shouted for him to be quiet and sent another wave of fire towards Izuku, who stood firm, unyielding. Izuku questioned Endeavor's reasoning, then summoned his crossbow and loaded a golden arrow. He shot at Endeavor, who attempted to incinerate the arrow but failed, resulting in a cut on his cheek. Endeavor growled, asserting that the meaning of being a hero was to save people and give hope. He conjured a spear of fire and hurled it at Izuku, who deftly deflected it with his shield. Izuku then asked if Endeavor knew what happened to heroes, to which Endeavor shook his head. Izuku ominously replied that it was nothing good. He summoned a rocket, narrowly missing Endeavor, who then charged at Izuku, searing his arm. Izuku retaliated with a kick to Endeavor's chest, knocking him to one knee. He summoned 2 black skulls, placing them before him, and asked Endeavor if he wanted to be a hero. Endeavor eagerly affirmed his desire, more than anything in the world. Izuku grinned and summoned a 3rd skull, placing it between the others. Dark clouds gathered as lightning struck, and the ground trembled as the skulls grew larger, forming a skeletal creature that rose from the earth. With crazed eyes and a maniacal smile, Izuku declared that Endeavor would die like a hero. One of the creature's heads shot forward, and despite Endeavor's attempts to stop it with fire, the attack was relentless. The creature caused immense damage, leaving Endeavor in agony. Izuku laughed wickedly, showing no remorse, as his laughter mixed with Endeavor's cries, creating a chilling symphony that unsettled the onlookers. Eventually, the creature began to disintegrate, leaving only black dust behind. Izuku expressed disappointment that the fun was over, and Endeavor pleaded for the torment to stop, offering anything in exchange. Izuku revealed that Endeavor had ruined his life, and in a twisted sense of humor, he found the situation amusing. He then summoned a splash bottle filled with a pink liquid that smelled of strawberries and watermelon. Izuku walked away from the arena, his sword resting on his shoulder and a bored expression on his face. He couldn't help but think about the so-called abilities of the number 2 hero, feeling a mix of amusement and disbelief. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and he stopped in his tracks, turning around with a mischievous grin. As he made his way back to the stage, a slow laugh escaped his lips. Reaching the center, he kicked the unconscious hero aside and faced the audience. He asked those who believed in his innocence to raise their hands. Katsuki, Momo, Kirishima, Tokoyami, Monoma, Aizawa, and Nezu all raised their hands. Izuku's gaze lingered on Monoma and Tokoyami, particularly on Monoma, who responded with confidence. Monoma pointed out that Izuku wasn't like the rest of Class 2A, he treated them as equals. Tokoyami added that he had realized months ago that Izuku could never betray them, admitting he had been blinded by grief. Izuku smiled and beckoned them to join him on stage. As they gathered, he declared that these 7 individuals were under his protection. He warned that anyone who dared to approach them with ill intentions would face serious consequences. The crowd grew pale at his words, nodding in agreement, but 2 voices rose in protest. Oako questioned why those 7 deserved special treatment, while Lita echoed her sentiment with anger. Izuku took a deep breath to steady himself before explaining. He pointed to Katsuki, calling him his best friend and brother in all but blood, acknowledging their differences but emphasizing his loyalty during Izuku's darkest moments. He then gestured to Kirishima, praising his unwavering support and courage. Next, he acknowledged Tokoyami, referring to him as a companion in the shadows. He turned to Monoma, recognizing his loyalty despite past misunderstandings. Aizawa was highlighted as a mentor and parental figure who had always been there for him. Finally, he gestured to Nezu, expressing excitement for their future adventures together. As he approached Momo, he spoke of her as the light that dispelled his darkness. He got closer, sharing a moment of connection that surprised everyone in the audience. The crowd gasped as he leaned in, and while she initially reacted with shock, she soon melted into the moment. However, the scene sparked jealousy in 2 individuals, Ochako and Lita. Lita's frustration boiled over, and he launched himself at Izuku, flames igniting from his legs. Izuku summoned a shield to deflect the attack, countering with an axe poised at Lita's neck. Izuku turned to Nezu and proposed a trial by combat to settle their differences. Nezu enthusiastically agreed, and Izuku looked at Lita, who was eager for a fight. They descended into a dust-filled pit, and Nezu chuckled at the unfolding drama. Izuku suggested they fight without armor, and Lita stripped down to a tight leotard. Izuku removed his crown and robe, summoning a shield to toss to Lita, who dismissed it, confident in his abilities. Izuku shrugged and dropped his own shield, ready to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Nezu declared that Lita could take the first hit, and Lita, filled with rage, prepared to attack. Izuku, however, leaned casually against the wall of the pit, checking his nails, which only fueled Lita's anger further. Izuku found amusement in Lita's humiliation, deciding to toy with him a bit longer. He reassured Lita that they would settle their feelings through their fists, but regardless of the outcome, there would be no hard feelings afterward. It stays in the pit. To everyone else, it sounded like a noble comment, but to Lita, it felt like a slap to the face, leaving him feeling disgraced in front of everyone. Lita felt his pride wounded and expressed his frustration. Izuku shook his head helplessly, crossing his arms and closing his eyes. He repeated his earlier statement, emphasizing that it remained in the pit. Lita accused Izuku of making his girl jealous, to which Izuku responded playfully, reiterating that it stayed in the pit. Lita continued to vent, pointing out that Izuku had referred to a superior as brother. Izuku explained that they were both animals who had been hunted but had learned to fight back, making them essentially brothers. Lita, frustrated, declared that this was no longer about him but about everyone else. He accused Izuku of betrayal. Izuku's eyes widened at Lita's harsh words, and he spoke helplessly, insisting that he had been framed and that his friends had pressured him into the situation. Lita dismissed Izuku's claims, insisting he would show him his place. With determination, Lita charged at Izuku, flames bursting from his exhausts. Izuku stood still, analyzing Lita's movements as if time had slowed. When Lita's leg finally struck his arm, he remained unfazed. Lita was shocked that Izuku hadn't moved at all. Izuku then grabbed Lita's leg and slammed him into the ground repeatedly, throwing him against the side of the pit. After Lita crashed into the wall, Izuku chuckled and cracked his neck, repeating that it stayed in the pit. As Lita flew towards him, Izuku caught his foot and delivered a swift elbow strike, causing Lita's face to pale. The onlookers flinched at the sight. Lita gasped, accusing Izuku of playing dirty, calling him a villain. Izuku shrugged, indifferent to the accusation. He charged at Lita, stomping on his hand and delivering punches to his face. He then grabbed Lita by the neck, dragging him along the wall as he ran. By the end of this, Lita was starting to see black dots in his vision. Izuku, frustrated, delivered a knee to Lita's face, urging him to stay down for both their sakes. Lita shakily rose to his feet, blood trickling down his face and torso. The crowd cheered for him, except for those who trusted Izuku, already knowing the outcome. Lita regained his fighting stance and proclaimed that a true hero never stays down. Izuku, bored, decided to end it. He delivered a punch to Lita's throat, causing him to fall to the ground, gasping for air. After a moment, Lita managed to get to his knees, fear evident on his face. Izuku knelt beside him, explaining that while Lita used words, the universal language of their world was violence. He stood up, putting his crown and robe back on, declaring it was over. He turned and walked away, ready to embrace a new day and a new path toward becoming a hero. Izuku walked over to gather his belongings, adjusting his crown and fluffing his robe. He glanced back at the crowd, who looked at him expectantly. He dismissed them, telling them the show was over and to leave. As he cleared the area, he passed by Nezu, who jumped onto his head and curled up in his crown. Izuku smiled and continued toward Yue, thinking he should visit someone he hadn't seen in a while. On his way, he encountered All Might in his muscular form, frowning at him from the entrance. Izuku groaned, rolling his eyes, hoping the hero hadn't done anything foolish. Unfortunately, All Might placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, stopping him. All Might's booming voice echoed as he insisted they had business to discuss. Izuku cringed at the loudness and shook his head, still with Nezu perched on him, insisting they had nothing to discuss. As he attempted to walk away, All Might tightened his grip on his shoulder, growling that they indeed had matters to address. Izuku slowly turned to look at him, a glint in his eye reminiscent of a dangerous presence All Might had only seen before. Izuku warned All Might to back off, expressing his frustration and concern for both of them. All Might responded with his iconic laughter, gripping Izuku's shoulder tighter. He insisted that Izuku shouldn't get ahead of himself, but before he could finish, Izuku summoned the axe of peace and severed All Might's grip. It took a moment for All Might to comprehend what had occurred. When he did, he clutched the stump of his hand and cried out in pain, rolling on the ground, overwhelmed by his agony. Izuku observed him with disdain, wiping the blood off his axe. Once it was clean, he squatted down and grabbed All Might's hair, pulling his face to meet his gaze. A malicious smirk spread across Izuku's face as an idea formed in his mind. He asked All Might if he wanted him to stop the bleeding. All Might, desperate, pleaded for him to do so. Izuku's grin widened as he summoned several items, including a crafting table, which he placed beside him. All Might looked on in confusion and fear, muttering a question about what Izuku was doing. Ignoring him, Izuku asked if he recognized the items he had summoned. All Might's confusion turned to recognition as Izuku dropped a piece of coal, some gray powder, and a flame. Izuku feigned surprise and sarcastically praised All Might for his knowledge. He then returned to his crafting table, tossing the components onto it. The materials shook and fused together, forming a black ball with glowing pits of orange, red, and gray. Izuku turned back to All Might, asking if he knew what it was. When All Might shook his head, Izuku chuckled and explained that it was a fire charge, which would combust upon contact with any surface. A glint appeared in his eyes, causing All Might to pale as he realized the implications. He begged Izuku to reconsider, pleading for mercy. Izuku, unfazed, told him he was all out of mercy. He grabbed All Might's arm and pressed the fire charge onto the wound, cauterizing it. All Might screamed in pain while Izuku laughed maniacally. After the fire charge was used, Izuku stepped back to admire his handiwork. Handless arm. He looked down at the unconscious All Might and scoffed, questioning how he would explain this to Nezu. To Izuku's surprise, Nezu jumped down from his head, assuring him that he had witnessed everything and fully supported his actions. He promised to explain the situation to the Hero Commission. Grateful, Izuku thanked Nezu and expressed his desire to go somewhere private. Nezu offered to escort him, but Izuku declined, appreciating the thought. Unbeknownst to them, 6 individuals were watching from around a corner, concerned for Izuku's mental state. Aizawa, Momo, Katsuki, Tokoyami, Kirishima, and Minoma exchanged worried glances and silently agreed to follow him. As Izuku walked away from UA, he passed through traffic and civilians with a distant look in his eyes, confirming the group's suspicions. Katsuki realized where Izuku was headed and shared his thoughts with the others. They arrived at a hill dotted with graves as darkness fell. They spotted Izuku searching for his mother's grave. Upon finding it, they noticed the fury in his eyes, which mirrored their own shock at the state of the grave. It was a traditional gray stone, but it bore graffiti with hurtful words and a chunk that was missing. The sight filled them with anger and concern for Izuku, who radiated an aura of rage. Just as they were about to intervene, he fell to his knees and began to sob. Izuku expressed his sorrow for what his mother had endured, blaming himself for the pain. The 6 friends, initially ready to stop him from lashing out, felt a wave of relief as they witnessed his vulnerability. Tokoyami remarked on the irony of Izuku, the conqueror of All Might, now crying. Katsuki agreed, noting that despite his power, Izuku remained the crybaby they knew and loved. Aizawa shared a saying from his father, emphasizing that a man cries not from weakness, but from having been strong for too long. Kirishima acknowledged the hardships Izuku had faced, while Minoma pointed out the years of bullying he had endured. Aizawa reminded them to ensure Izuku didn't endanger anyone. Izuku continued to cry for a while before standing up and pulling out a bottle of gray liquid. He looked at it with a sigh, grateful for his experimentation and the potion of restoration he had perfected. Removing the stopper, he poured the contents onto the grave, instantly restoring it to its former glory. Izuku smiled at the sight and sat down again, leaning against the grave. He felt a wave of regret wash over him as he thought about the years of hard work he had put his mother through. He promised himself that he would sing the song she had always wanted to hear. He had finally finished it while in Tartarus. It might not make up for everything that happened, but he hoped it would bring her some comfort. Kirishima was surprised by what he heard. He couldn't believe Izuku was going to sing. Katsuki confirmed it, noting that he had no idea the nerd had such a talent. Tokoyami admitted they had never asked, while Kirishima remarked that it didn't seem very manly. Momo wondered if he was good, and Katsuki grinned, assuring them that he was indeed impressive. Aizawa chimed in, teasingly referring to Kyokajiru, but Katsuki dismissed it, insisting they should listen. As Izuku prepared to sing, his friends turned their attention to him. He began with a haunting melody, his voice filling the air. The group was taken aback by the depth of Izuku's singing voice. They had never heard him like this before, and his ability to reach such low notes left them in awe. Monoma was impressed, while Momo felt it was an understatement to say he was good. Katsuki agreed wholeheartedly, and Kirishima wiped away a tear, calling it a manly moment. Tokoyami found it relatable. Aizawa was surprised to discover that Izuku had such talent. As Izuku continued, he sang about walking alone in restless dreams, describing the cold streets and the piercing light that interrupted the silence. His friends listened intently, captivated by the emotion in his voice. Momo speculated about the meaning behind the lyrics, wondering if the light referred to a hero. Aizawa suggested it might be All Might, the symbol of peace. Izuku sang on, painting a picture of people who spoke without words and wrote songs that went unheard. The intensity of his performance left everyone speechless as he transitioned from soft tones to powerful crescendos. Kirishima marveled at the echo, while Momo nodded in agreement, both of them caught up in the moment. As Izuku reached the climax of the song, he expressed the pain of silence growing like a cancer, urging others to hear his words. Aizawa shared his thoughts, suggesting that the silence referred to the neglect and bullying Izuku had faced. The group gasped at the realization of how deep the message ran. Izuku concluded with a powerful declaration, and the atmosphere was charged with emotion. When he finished, he sat in silence, eyes closed and a smile on his face, until he heard clapping. He turned to see his 6 friends, who were all visibly moved. Shocked, he blushed and covered his face with his hands, realizing they had heard everything. Aizawa acknowledged the performance, calling it a remarkable show. Izuku peeked over his arms, hope shining in his eyes, and was met with expressions that conveyed disbelief at his modesty. Momo reassured him that it had been amazing, and Izuku stood up, scratching the back of his head, acknowledging that it had indeed been good. Katsuki reminded him that they had heard every word and that there was no silence anymore. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes as he smiled, calling Katsuki a softie. Katsuki dismissed it, and Izuku playfully agreed. He then hugged Katsuki, who accepted the gesture without hesitation. Izuku turned to the others, urging them to join in for a group hug, knowing it might be one of the last times they could all be together like this. They shared a moment of silence until Katsuki broke it by revealing that he had recorded the entire performance. Izuku's eyes widened in shock as he exclaimed in disbelief. A few days later, after Izuku's time of mourning, it was time to return to lessons. His classmates were nervous around him, remembering his fierce demeanor in the pit. However, Izuku didn't mind. It meant more time for training and for Momo. Speaking of Momo, she had become his girlfriend after a confrontation with Lita. She had confessed her feelings after he returned to the dorms, and they had shared a heartfelt moment where he explained the scars on his face from his time in prison. Momo had been moved to tears by his misfortune and chose to stay by his side that night. As they prepared to return to class, Izuku felt a sense of dread. It wasn't about Lita or Ochako, it was the distrust he felt toward most of his classmates, especially since many of them were unaware of his mother's passing. The day only got worse when he was forced into the uncomfortable UA uniform. As he walked down the hallway to class, he bumped into another student. The student looked at him with a mix of fear and false bravado, questioning who he was. Izuku noticed the boy blocking his path and asked if he could go to class. The boy taunted him, mocking his appearance. Izuku froze at the comment, and everyone in the hallway turned to see how he would react. With his hair covering his face, he spoke in a calm voice, asking what the boy had said. The boy repeated his taunt, but before he could finish, Izuku summoned his sword and pinned the boy's hand to the wall. The boy screamed in pain, threatening Izuku with expulsion and mentioning his father's influence. Izuku quietly examined his sword, tracing the glowing blade with his finger before pricking it. He told the boy that he knew his threats were empty because he had crafted the sword specifically for a purpose. The boy's face went pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. Izuku pointed the blade at the boy's neck and demanded an apology, which the boy quickly gave while bowing in SBMs and, after Izuku deemed it sufficient, he threw a potion of regeneration at the boy, who watched in awe as his wound healed. The boy expressed his gratitude for Izuku's mercy. Izuku stated that he wasn't a cold-blooded killer, as long as others treated him well. He warned that the same courtesy would not apply if they mistreated him and told the boy to leave. As he walked back down the hallway, the other students parted to let him through. He sighed, ready to face the day, and opened the door to his classroom, where the atmosphere shifted to one of silence and mixed emotions. Izuku scoffed and took a seat at the back, relishing his place. He closed his eyes, enjoying a moment of peace until Todoroki interrupted, claiming the seat was his. Izuku responded dismissively, which only angered Todoroki further. When Todoroki placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, several students began to sweat nervously. Izuku opened his eyes, locking onto Todoroki's with a challenging gaze. He warned Todoroki that the last person who had done the same had lost a hand. Todoroki scoffed, dismissing the threat. Izuku then showed Todoroki a picture on his phone, revealing a shocking image of All Might in a vulnerable state, with Izuku smiling in the background. Todoroki's expression changed to one of shock as he realized the implications. He called Izuku a freak, which caused Izuku's smile to vanish, replaced by a cold, emotionless stare. Izuku asked Todoroki if he had done something he shouldn't have, referencing an incident from months prior. Todoroki's smugness returned, believing he had the upper hand. Izuku's demeanor shifted, and he began to laugh maniacally, drawing the attention of the entire class. He questioned Todoroki about his actions, and when Todoroki dismissed him, Izuku summoned his crossbow, declaring it a rocket launcher. Lita, noticing the contraband, tried to intervene, but Izuku silenced him with a fierce glare, asserting that adults were speaking. Lita protested, but Izuku's temper flared, and he threatened both Todoroki and Lita. As he aimed his crossbows at them, Aizawa entered the room, coffee cup in hand, and asked what was happening. Oako quickly explained that Izuku had retaliated after being provoked. Aizawa paused, considering the situation, and inquired if they had mentioned Izuku's mother. When Oako confirmed this, Aizawa raised his hand, signaling that he had heard enough. He turned to Lita and Todoroki, who were still in the line of fire, and the tension in the room escalated. This will show Momo your impulsivity and my maturity. Lita realized that Midoriya would be embarrassed and mocked in front of the entire class. Aizawa announced that Lita and Todoroki would both have detention. He instructed Izuku to put the rocket launchers away and sit down. Todoroki and Lita were taken aback. Izuku groaned as he sat down, stowing away his crossbows. The students nearby whispered among themselves. Izuku pouted, feeling frustrated that Aizawa was ruining his plans for revenge against the main character and the imitation of Sonic. Lita protested, claiming that Midoriya had attacked them. Aizawa acknowledged that it was a justified action. Todoroki, pretending to be confused, questioned what Aizawa meant. Techno was startled to see Izuku in his Mindscape, which he had transformed into his own house. Izuku was confused about his surroundings and questioned how he ended up there. Techno explained that it was technically Izuku's Mindscape but had been altered. Izuku noticed a pair of shoes and some white powder by the door, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Techno hesitated to explain when another figure appeared, a man around 5 feet 8 inches with medium-length brown hair, dressed in green cargo shorts, a green jacket, brown fingerless gloves, and a blue beanie. The most striking feature was the Mexican-themed mask with a small smiley face. The newcomer approached Izuku, sniffing him enthusiastically and declaring he was going to speedrun smell him. Izuku was taken aback and looked to Techno for assistance, who struggled to contain his laughter. Techno finally intervened, telling the man, now identified as Quacki, to stop, which he did, vanishing with a soft pop. Izuku was bewildered by Quacki's sudden disappearance and learned that he could change his appearance at will. Before he could process this, Quacki reappeared in a different outfit, complete with a scar running from his eyebrow to his chin. Izuku was astonished by the rapid change and bombarded Quacki with questions about how he got there and the nature of the landscape. Techno attempted to explain, but Quacki interjected, claiming he had appeared out of nowhere and Techno had brought him along. Izuku recalled hearing Quackity's name before and asked about it. Quackity cheekily mentioned threatening Techno's prized horse, which made Izuku stifle a laugh. Techno pointed out that threatening someone's prized possession wasn't something to boast about, to which Quackity shrugged, claiming it worked. Curious about Quackity's abilities, Izuku asked if he had any powers like Techno or himself. Quackity grinned and revealed that his power revolved around gambling and luck, stating that he always won whenever he made a bet or deal. He demonstrated by changing into a suit and tie and conjuring 3 casino tokens, his demeanor shifting to a more confident and intimidating one as he asked if Izuku had ever been to Las Nevadas. Izuku, still processing everything, admitted he hadn't. Quackity, now back in his original clothes, suggested they continue watching something. Izuku was confused and asked what they were going to watch. Quackity excitedly revealed that they could see Izuku's life, which left him bewildered. Techno explained that they had created a TV to observe the outside world. Curious, Izuku looked at the screen. Outside, he had stopped moving after dashing at Koda, leaving everyone confused about his actions. Koda, surprised by the turn of events, whispered for Izuku to walk out of the ring. As Izuku staggered toward the edge, the lights in Gym Gamma suddenly went out, prompting Aizawa to wonder if there was a power outage. As the students searched for answers in the darkness, a deep, slow, echoed laugh filled the air. Aizawa looked at the class, ready to announce the next matches. He snapped his fingers, and the new pairings appeared on the screen: Mina vs Todoroki, Lita vs Momo, Ojiro vs Tokoyami, and Ochako vs Katsuki. He began, "Okay, first team go." Mina raised her hand, expressing her desire to withdraw from the match. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, curious about her reasoning. Mina gave him a look that said it all. Aizawa nodded in understanding. Smart choice. Todoroki wins by default. Now for the second matchup. Lita and Momo stepped into the arena, staring each other down. After a moment of silence, Lita bowed respectfully. He wished Momo a good match, but she interrupted him, urging him to get on with it. The class was taken aback by her bluntness, while Izuku found it amusing, thinking that his personality was influencing her. Lita stammered, trying to defend his sportsmanship, but Momo dismissed him, insisting he hurry up. Izuku couldn't help but laugh, claiming credit for her newfound attitude. Katsuki joined in the laughter, teasing Lita further. Momo, however, took action by creating a metal staff and swiftly knocking Lita out of bounds. Aizawa remarked that the match was anticlimactic and declared Momo the winner. Lita protested, claiming he wasn't ready and demanded a rematch, but Izuku rolled his eyes, reminding him that life doesn't work that way. Aizawa agreed, telling Lita to sit down. As Ojiro and Tokoyami prepared for their match, they exchanged nods, signaling their readiness. After the fight, Tokoyami approached a bruised Ojiro, helping him up and offering words of encouragement. Aizawa provided feedback, advising Ojiro to incorporate more unpredictable moves and utilize his tail. He then turned to Tokoyami, suggesting he rely less on his quirk and focus on martial arts for better mobility. Next up were Ochako and Katsuki. Ochako felt nervous, while Katsuki exuded confidence. Aizawa signaled for the match to begin. Katsuki charged at Ochako, using his explosive abilities to gain the upper hand. She narrowly avoided a kick, but he quickly followed up with a powerful backhand, sending her to the ground. Despite her efforts to rise, Katsuki continued his relentless assault with a barrage of explosions. Ochako struggled to defend herself, feeling overwhelmed by his strength. She realized that she was facing a formidable opponent, one whose smile felt more villainous than heroic. Katsuki inspected his gauntlet, revealing that he and Izuku had modified it for maximum impact. He relished the fear he instilled in Ochako as he prepared for a rapid-fire attack. The gauntlet released a series of explosions, creating chaos in the arena. Ochako had no choice but to endure the onslaught, the air filled with the scent of smoke and the sound of explosions. The class watched in horror as the fight escalated. Izuku felt anger rising at the comments made by his classmates, while Momo noticed his frustration and gestured for Katsuki to finish the fight. Katsuki acknowledged her and stepped into the smoke, searching for his opponent. Suddenly, Ochako emerged from behind him, using her quirk to make him weightless and throwing him toward the edge of the arena. Katsuki, unfazed, used his explosions to regain control and land safely. He smirked, claiming that she had only made him stronger. With renewed determination, he propelled himself forward at incredible speed, landing a powerful punch that sent Ochako crashing into the wall. As her quirk wore off, Katsuki landed on his feet, turning to the class with a triumphant declaration. The class stared in shock, while Izuku erupted in laughter, finding humor in the situation. His laughter was contagious, waking Aizawa from his slumber, who reacted in a flurry of confusion. "Not now, let me res." The teacher stopped speaking and rubbed his eyes, realizing he had been woken up and embarrassed in front of his class. He looked at the source of the disruption, only to see a laughing Izuku rolling on the floor while clutching his sides. Izuku found himself unable to contain his laughter, which abruptly ceased when he met Aizawa's gaze. Aizawa's expression was one of irritation, his quirk activated. He swiftly used his capture gear to wrap Izuku up and dragged him closer until they were face to face. With an eerily calm demeanor, Aizawa asked if Izuku found the situation funny. Izuku's laughter froze, and he gulped, realizing he had crossed a line. He stammered, insisting that it wasn't funny at all. Aizawa, however, seemed to find the situation amusing and proposed a challenge. Izuku glanced at his opponent, Shiro, who appeared eager for the chance to defeat one of the strongest students in the class. Aizawa activated his quirk again, prompting Izuku to agree to the challenge enthusiastically. As Izuku prepared for the match, he began to transform his appearance. He removed his crown, stowed it away, and donned a half-black and half-brown masquerade mask. He took off his robe and put on a black military jacket, tying his hair back to complete the look. He declared himself Sir Bill-Aim III, much to Shiro's confusion. Izuku insisted on a formal introduction, asking Shiro about his estate and assets. Shiro, bewildered, defended himself, claiming his family was well off. Izuku's excitement grew as he welcomed Shiro to the ranks of the wealthy. He conjured 2 chairs and invited Shiro to sit, treating him as a distinguished guest. The class watched in confusion, with some questioning if this was supposed to be a fight. Aizawa, however, found the situation entertaining and settled back in his sleeping bag, sipping a juice box. As Shiro attempted to spell a word, the class's disappointment grew. Izuku encouraged him, but Shiro faltered, leading to laughter erupting from the audience. Even Aizawa managed a small smirk at the spectacle. Shiro, feeling embarrassed, hesitated to drink a potion that Izuku offered. Izuku insisted it was high in vitamin B, but Shiro questioned its safety. The class chimed in, and Izuku's playful antics continued, leading to a light-hearted atmosphere. When Shiro finally drank the potion, Izuku playfully kicked him, sending him flying out of the ring. He turned to Aizawa, asking if that was entertaining enough. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at the nickname Izuku had given him but conceded that it was indeed amusing. Izuku then pointed out that the matchups had not yet been established. Aizawa sighed, realizing there were still participants left. Momo expressed her reluctance to continue, reminding everyone of the previous match's intensity. Izuku, confused, reassured her that it was just a training exercise and no one would get hurt. Momo, however, referenced a past incident involving Todoroki, which prompted a reaction from him. Aizawa finally announced the matchups, with Todoroki facing Tokoyami and Izuku set to battle Katsuki. Izuku welcomed the challenge, noting that his previous matches had not been particularly demanding. As the fight between Todoroki and Tokoyami began, Todoroki declared his intent to finish quickly, while Tokoyami insisted he had to try. Their banter continued, showcasing their personalities as the match commenced with Tokoyami activating his quirk. The dual-haired boy responded by sending a glacier back at his opponent, causing Izuku to sigh. He reflected on how, despite knowing his weakness, their conversation at the sports festival, and the redemption of Todoroki's father, he still refused to use his fire. Tokoyami moved aside as Dark Shadow landed a blow on Todoroki's arm. He winced, icing the arm to alleviate the pain, and continued his assault with glaciers. Tokoyami seemed to be slowing down. He wasn't accustomed to such movement. His quirk typically handled attacks and defenses while he stood back and directed it. It was clear that breaking massive, 10-ton glaciers with a shadow was not feasible. Todoroki observed Tokoyami's struggle and remarked that he wasn't suited for this type of fighting and should give up. Tokoyami, undeterred, launched more attacks. Todoroki shrugged off the warning and raised his right hand, gathering an abundance of mist around it. He grinned as he saw Tokoyami leap in for an attack. With a swift motion, ice erupted from his foot as he moved his arm forward. The ice advanced dangerously close to Tokoyami, who gritted his teeth and reluctantly admitted defeat. However, the ice did not stop. Tokoyami's expression shifted to one of worry as he shouted his surrender again, but the ice continued its relentless approach. Izuku shouted out, urging Todoroki to heed Tokoyami's words, but Todoroki ignored him and persisted with his icy barrage. Frustrated, Izuku glanced at Aizawa, who was sound asleep. He couldn't understand how Aizawa could remain so calm during such chaos. Nevertheless, he believed in Tokoyami's strength to find a way to overcome the challenge. When he noticed Momo giving him a pleading look, Izuku struggled internally before relenting. He decided to intervene, jumping into the arena and grabbing Todoroki's arm, which disrupted his concentration and halted the attack. Todoroki was taken aback, and in a moment of impulsiveness, Izuku punched him in the face, knocking him out. A small amount of blood dripped from Todoroki's nose onto Izuku's hand, prompting him to shake it off in disgust. At that moment, Aizawa stirred awake and announced the next round before promptly falling back asleep. Izuku was left bewildered by Aizawa's ability to doze off so easily. Izuku watched in awe as Aizawa slipped in and out of consciousness with such ease, as if he had mastered the art over centuries. While he was absorbed in his thoughts, Katsuki approached from behind and playfully slapped the back of his head, snapping him back to reality. Katsuki urged Izuku to focus, reminding him that they had a match to prepare for and that he wanted to discuss something afterward. Rubbing the back of his head, Izuku shook off the dizziness and acknowledged the upcoming match. He walked to the arena, taking his position opposite Katsuki. They both looked to Aizawa for the signal to begin, but found him still asleep. Katsuki, frustrated, called out to Aizawa to wake up. Aizawa opened his eyes, activating his quirk, and warned Katsuki that if he disturbed him again, they would have a serious discussion about his place in the hero course. Katsuki flinched but nodded, redirecting his focus to Izuku. They exchanged grins as Aizawa counted down to the start of the match. At the signal, Katsuki launched himself toward Izuku, attempting his infamous right hook, only for Izuku to dodge and catch his arm instead. Katsuki was momentarily stunned. Izuku then threw Katsuki over his shoulder, slamming him into the ground, which caused Katsuki to spit out some saliva. However, he quickly recovered and landed a punch to Izuku's gut, followed by a knee to his face. Izuku absorbed the blows and retaliated by grabbing Katsuki's arm and headbutting him. Katsuki stumbled back, clutching his nose in pain, but quickly dodged a kick aimed at his face. He reeled back his arm, preparing to strike Izuku in a vulnerable spot. Izuku, anticipating the move, summoned his Techno shield and deflected Katsuki's punch, forcing him to the ground. Izuku then jumped onto the shield, causing Katsuki to groan in discomfort as he struggled beneath him. Izuku encouraged Katsuki to step up his game, but Katsuki dismissed him, claiming he was just warming up. He unleashed an explosion, propelling both himself and Izuku apart as he regained his footing. The two fighters circled each other, Katsuki generating sparks and crackles on his arm while Izuku maintained a calm stance. They exchanged blows, Katsuki utilizing his quirk while Izuku relied on his fighting style. After a few minutes of stalemate, Katsuki smirked and prepared his ultimate move. He apologized to Izuku for using his technique, which confused Izuku until he noticed orange veins spreading up. Katsuki's arms. Katsuki summoned a plain shield and an unbreakable book, tapping it against the shield, which began to glow. Satisfied with his preparation, he turned back to Izuku, who was now surrounded by orange sparks. Izuku realized that Katsuki had not heeded his earlier advice. As Katsuki declared his intention to unleash a final, powerful move, Izuku raised an eyebrow, bracing himself for the challenge. He began to stretch, his body transforming into a pig-man hybrid, towering at 8 feet tall. He summoned his full set of netherite armor and equipped his axe, ready for the showdown. Izuku's irises shifted from their usual red to a vibrant yellow, expanding until his entire eye glowed with the color. He took a deep breath, his voice steady as he warned Katsuki that it was his last chance to back down. Katsuki, though visibly shaken, defiantly declared that he would not give up. Izuku chuckled gruffly and assumed a fighting stance, feeling a slight twitch of pain as the crowd grew increasingly rowdy, chanting for excitement. The atmosphere was electric as both fighters prepared for their final moves, charging towards each other with determination. Katsuki shouted his signature move, while Izuku remained silent, focusing intently. As Katsuki unleashed his powerful attack, Izuku deftly dodged, grabbing Katsuki's arm and striking it with the blunt side of his axe. The impact rendered Katsuki's power useless, causing a shockwave that echoed through the arena. Katsuki cried out as Izuku delivered a swift kick to his midsection, sending him crashing against the wall. The class watched in awe as Izuku approached the fallen Katsuki, his eyes transitioning from yellow to orange, and then to a fierce red, gripping his axe tightly. Aizawa announced that Katsuki was out of bounds, declaring Izuku the winner, but Izuku continued to walk toward Katsuki, his expression intense. Aizawa urged Izuku to step back, but Izuku hesitated, struggling to regain control. Finally, he transformed back to his normal self, exhaling in what seemed like relief as he raised a hand to his forehead. He acknowledged his need to train more with that form, realizing he had almost lost control. As medical bots arrived to assist Katsuki, Izuku returned to his classmates, observing their mixed reactions. Some were horrified, while others were in awe, and one boy with dual-colored hair seethed with anger. Izuku chose to ignore it, knowing he had another opponent to face. Aizawa called for the final 2 competitors to take their places in the arena. They stood on opposite sides, glaring at each other with determination. The class buzzed with excitement as the 2 titans prepared to clash. With Aizawa's command, Todoroki launched a barrage of ice towards Izuku. Unfazed, Izuku effortlessly cut through the ice with his weapon, maintaining his position without moving an inch. Todoroki, frustrated, continued to attack, but each strike was met with the same outcome. Izuku calmly pointed out that Todoroki was only using half of his power, which prompted a defensive response from Todoroki. He insisted that he would never use his left side, as it belonged to his father. Izuku raised an eyebrow, recalling their previous discussions about this very issue. Determined to prove a point, Izuku withdrew the axe of peace, asking if Todoroki would mind if he removed the barrier. Taken aback, Todoroki didn't have time to respond before Izuku swiftly incapacitated him, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground, overwhelmed by pain. Izuku looked down at Todoroki with pity, reminding him that holding on to hatred would only lead him to become like his father. Aizawa gestured for Izuku to heal Todoroki, and although Izuku felt it might have been better to let him learn a lesson, he complied. He summoned a potion and threw it at Todoroki, restoring his lost limbs without a trace of injury. As Todoroki lost consciousness from the pain, Izuku tossed him toward the medical bots, who barely caught him. Aizawa, unimpressed, questioned the necessity of Izuku's actions, to which Izuku confidently replied that it was indeed necessary. Aizawa sighed in frustration, muttering under his breath about the challenges of dealing with Izuku. He then addressed the class, announcing the results of the tournament. Izuku had won, Katsuki came in second, and Todoroki placed third. The class remained silent, some in fear while others agreed with the results. Aizawa instructed everyone to return to the classroom, and they complied eagerly. As they left the arena, Izuku found himself deep in thought, realizing that the voices in his head were growing louder, a potential concern for the future. Izuku laughed heartily, a pink glow beginning to form around his hands and face. The classmates looked on in fear as he raised his hands, his laughter growing louder, the glow intensifying and horns sprouting from his forehead. As the class stood frozen in shock, Izuku approached Kota slowly, his eyes shining a bright pink. Only Katsuki had the courage to speak up, questioning Izuku's actions. Izuku stopped laughing and turned his head toward Katsuki, a smirk spreading across his face. He spoke in a deep voice, introducing himself as Choiros, indicating that the real Izuku was not present at the moment. Aizawa took a fighting stance, demanding to know what he meant. Choiros snorted in amusement, reiterating that Izuku was engaged in a conversation elsewhere. Turning to Koda, who trembled in fear, Choiros warned him to leave if he didn't want to get hurt. Koda nodded shakily and exited the ring. Aizawa declared Izuku the winner, to which Choiros responded that Izuku would return shortly but had one last warning. He advised those who had betrayed Izuku to keep their distance, as he was harboring a great deal of anger and resentment. Pointing at Todoroki, Choiros emphasized that he should especially stay away, using a colorful metaphor to describe him. Todoroki challenged Choiros, asking what would happen if he didn't comply. In an instant, Choiros appeared in front of him, gripping Todoroki's throat tightly, cutting off his air supply. He warned Todoroki to leave Izuku alone before he faced dire consequences. As Choiros's eyes dimmed and returned to their usual red, Izuku reappeared, slightly disoriented. He released Todoroki, not out of concern for him, but out of worry for his own hero career. He couldn't afford to have an innocent death on his record. Turning back to the class, Izuku noticed their shocked expressions and questioned why they always stared at him in disbelief when he did something extraordinary. Kirishima exclaimed that it was because it was so cool, while Shiro added that his fighting was awesome. Izuku shrugged, suggesting that a vegetarian diet had surprisingly improved his skills. With urgency, he insisted there was no time to explain and urged them to finish the chapter.